12 gauge shotgun is typically the most common gun used to hunt. That's what I have used most in the past. There are other types of shotguns, such as a 20 gauge or 10 gauge. People will use 20 gauge frequently when they dove hunt because they don't need as powerful of a shot. They'll use 20 gauge. 10 gauge, you probably won't ever hear of anyone using that to hunt, but it does exist. So just being aware of that is good. So the types of ammo, there's different shell sizes and shot sizes depending on what you're hunting. So as you can see in this chart over here, there's lead shot, steel shot, and buckshot. Lead shot, they're pretty much just the type of pellets used in the shell. You'll use this most often when you're dove hunting. You cannot use lead shot when you're duck hunting because it will contaminate water. So you're required by law to use steel shot. But when you're dove hunting, dove are obviously a smaller bird. So you'll typically use 8 or 7.5 shot because you need a smaller projectile in order to take down a dove. Now compared to like a goose or a duck, they're larger. So if you're duck hunting, you'll use steel shot and you'll probably use 2, 3, or 4, most likely 3 or 4 when you're duck hunting. And when you're goose hunting, you'll likely use BB, which are much bigger pellets because obviously a goose is much bigger than a dove. So you need a larger projectile to take it down. So yeah, typically the size of the shot depends on the size of the game. Buckshot will be used for smaller game. You won't really use this for birds ever. If you're hunting like upland game, like maybe a rabbit or some sort of small animal is when you'd use buckshot. I've never used that before, but people do use it to hunt. So now some common types of ducks and geese that I've seen and I've shot. The most common one that you'll probably all will recognize is a mallard. This is a pretty universal duck. A lot of times if people are showing a picture of a duck, this is what they use is a mallard. Other types, these are green-winged teal. They're much smaller. They're also a lot faster. This is another teal. It's a cinnamon teal. I've never seen or shot one of these, but they are a very beautiful duck, and it's like a prized duck almost. So people will mount that if they do kill one of those. On the bottom right is wood ducks. Those are another very pretty duck. They typically, you'll find them roosting in trees and flooded timbers. As the name wood duck, they are found typically in the woods. Up top is a pintail. This is like one of the largest ducks there is. You can only, I mentioned it earlier, each day you can only shoot one pintail simply because there's not as many pintails as there are teal and mallards. The name comes from the long tail. It's a very long pintail. It's a very long tail, so that's how they get their name. Over here is a canvasback. I never shot one of these, but I have seen them flying around occasionally. They're also more rare to see in Texas. But it's important to know what every duck looks like because when you are duck hunting, you can only shoot a certain amount of each duck, like I mentioned earlier. You can only shoot 5 mallards, 2 of which can be hens. The rest can be drakes. But they do that because they don't want you taking out all the hens because it messes with population. And also pintails are more rare, so they don't want someone going out and shooting 6 pintails. So there are limits, so it's important to know how each duck flies, how big they are, and like recognizing features of them. So for example, a pintail, you can recognize they're much bigger than the other ducks. They also have the long tail if it's a drake. So that's important to recognize there. Types of geese. So up top, on the top left is a snow goose. In the middle, there's a Canada goose, and on the far right, it's a speckled belly goose. These are the 3 types you'll typically hunt here in the US. The season also changes depending on the type of goose. The Canada goose, its season typically runs during duck season for us here in Texas. And that's also important. The seasons will change depending on what state you're in because as ducks and geese migrate down south,